If the truth matters, then the Israeli government must be held accountable for that attack. The American flag was flying on that ship, During your speech, truth as the most important tenet of American conservatism. Why, therefore, did you call irrelevant the Israeli attack in 1967 on the USS Liberty, which left dozens of American servicemen dead and hundreds wounded?
So what I actually said is that if we're looking at modern Israeli-American relations, looking at an attack that happened mistakenly by multiple Navy reports, multiple Israeli reports, and all available evidence, and using that attack in order to undermine today's relations between Israel and America, that's irrelevant. As irrelevant as it would be to cite a piece of evidence from World War II or from 1776 to define America's relations with, for example, Great Britain or Germany today. That does not mean that the attack wasn't horrible for the Americans involved, that it wasn't bloody and terrible. The Israeli government paid reparations to the people who were killed. If you look at the actual military record of what happened on the USS Liberty, it was clearly a mistaken and tragic attack. The people who frequently cite the USS Liberty, however, are not talking about the specifics of the USS Liberty. I suspect that the vast majority of people who bring this up are doing so in order to suggest that Israel deliberately attacked an American ship because Israel deliberately wants to harm America. It is connected generally with a larger point. I wonder if that's your point.
If the truth matters, then the Israeli government must be held accountable for that attack. The American flag was flying on that ship. You do not mistake an American ship for a foreign one when our flag is flying.
So, we can spend the rest of the time talking about the specifics of the U.S. Liberty attack, or you can actually go look at the naval investigations that were done, multiple naval investigations that were done. The reality is that people were flying Mirage planes for the Israeli military at the time. The USS Liberty was sailing in an area where it had essentially gone off-grid. The Israeli military mistook it for an Egyptian ship. They thought it was shelling Al Arish, which happened not to be true. In the initial attack, the American flag was knocked down, and then the attack went on for about 90 minutes. And then, as soon, you can hear this, by the way, on the tapes of the Israeli pilots talking to each other, as soon as they realize that it's an American ship, they call off the attack, they speed a ship to try and help the USS Liberty. There have been multiple unfortunate friendly fire incidents between Allied forces, including, for example, in the Gulf War, where U.S. forces were responsible for killing about 9 British troops during the Gulf War. It's an unfortunate reality of war, but you're not answering my question, which is, what is your broader agenda in asking the question? Because I suspect that your question is not limited to your specific ire over an incident that happened in 1967.
I think we should question any foreign country's relationship with our government.
That's totally fine, but I'm just wondering why you
serve American interests.
Again, I'm perfectly fine with questioning any country's relationship with the United States. But, again, I'm wondering what your motivation is in bringing up a 6-decade-old attack as though it is the #1 issue in assessing the relationship between Israel and the United States today.
Well, many problems persist to this day, but it's interesting that you say 6-decade-old incident when there are many people in this audience who were alive for that attack, as if this is something that's irrelevant.
Well, no, it's just not particularly relevant to assessing the relationship between the United States and Israel today, in the same way that in 1967, there are a wide variety of countries with which the United States had different relations. Okay, it's clear you're not going to actually answer the question, so I'm happy to move to this one.
Unfortunately, this will be the last question.
All right, you guys, I'll get right into this. A couple of weeks ago, I received a letter that changed my life, certainly changed the course of my life in politics. And I am going to read you that letter now and let you know that the author of it is sitting across from me. It reads, "My name is Philip Turney. I am 77 years old today. On June 8th, 1967, I was just 20 years old when the gallant crew of the USS Liberty was savagely attacked. Our American flag was proudly flying on our ship in the Mediterranean Sea that day. The designation AGTR-5 was clearly painted on the bow, port, and starboard sides. USS Liberty was written in English on her stern. When we arrived on June 7th, we were overflown by Israeli reconnaissance aircraft, and the same activity was repeated on the morning of June 8th. We were positively identified as American and friendly by the IDF. We had requested a destroyer escort long before we entered the Mediterranean, but we were denied twice. Our captain assured us that we were clearly marked as American and we therefore had nothing to fear. We were alone, 12.5 miles off the coast of the Sinai Peninsula, always in international waters. The Israeli reconnaissance aircraft were clearly marked with the Star of David. We therefore felt secure, seeing a flying boxcar and other smaller recon propeller aircraft taking good care of us.
Early June 1967. The six-day war in the Middle East between Israel, Egypt, Jordan, and Syria is underway. A spy ship, very lightly armed, but bristling with antennae, steams into the Mediterranean to eavesdrop on the conflict. It is patrolling in international waters off the Egyptian coast. At 2 in the afternoon, on June the 8th, with the war reaching its climax, Israeli jets and motor torpedo boats launch an unprovoked attack on the ship. They drop napalm and strafe its decks with rockets, cannon fire, and armor-piercing rounds before trying to sink it with torpedoes.
On June 6, 1967, Israeli Air Force fighters attacked Egyptian air bases, destroying 80% of their air assets. By June 7th, the air forces of Jordan and Syria were also destroyed, mostly on the ground, but the war was being monitored. The United States and other nations had a vested interest in what was transpiring in the Middle East, and gathering intelligence was critical for both political and strategic military planning. What was the USS Liberty? Why was it in the Eastern Mediterranean Sea during the Six-Day War? Why did Israeli air and naval forces attack an American ship? Why was so much effort put into the cover-up after the event?
Can I explain the USS Liberty incident? Sure. So the USS Liberty incident is very frequently used by anti-Semites to suggest that Israel deliberately targets American ships and then pays no penalty. So both American naval records and Israeli Air Force records suggest that there was a case of mistaken identity wherein USS Liberty was in the Mediterranean in a place they were not supposed to be. Israel thought that it was an Egyptian ship and shot it. That's the actual full story. Now, there are a bunch of conspiracy theories on actually both sides of this. There's a conspiracy theory on the American side that suggests that Israel, for no reason that can be discerned, decided to shoot up an American ship to accomplish no one really can explain what. And then on the other side, there is a theory that I have not seen a lot of support for, that the USS Liberty was being used as a transmission vessel to send Israeli military locations to the Egyptians during the 67 war, and Israel knew that and shot it. Again, I think the evidence is lacking on both of those things. And there have been multiple naval investigations of the USS Liberty incident. They all come down on the same side, which is that this is a mistaken case of allied, quote-unquote, friendly fire.
The whole thing is, when your own government betrays you, it still betrays you, and every congressman betrays you, say, what you saw you really didn't see, what you heard you really didn't hear. That's pretty bad. They're calling us liars, Nazis, and Jew haters, our own Congress. And I tell you what, I'd like to call out Charlie Kirk and Ben Shapiro with this conspiracy theory stuff. If you think it's a conspiracy, debate me live on TV. I'd be glad to debate you, and my shipmates will be there too if you want them. Debate us if you think it's a conspiracy theory. Or do you have the courage? I don't think you got the courage. I think you're cowards.
Another problem was the identification issue, in that the Liberty, at 10,150 tons, was 5 times larger than the ship they claimed to have mistaken for the Liberty. Both ships had totally different profiles. In addition, if the attack was a simple error, why were the Israeli jets unmarked, bearing no Israeli symbols, carrying no national identification, in violation of international law? Had the F-4 Phantoms from the Saratoga not been recalled, the torpedo boats would not have been able to engage, and the majority of the men would not have been killed and wounded. The official American position was that Israel called and said that they had recognized their mistake and the attack was over. So therefore, in response, McNamara recalled the jets. However, the attacks were then renewed for another 80 minutes. This was a strange development, since the U.S. Embassy in Tel Aviv reported that the Israelis had attacked a ship, but the nationality of the ship was yet undetermined by Israel. If this was true, how would McNamara know to recall the Phantoms, and that it was in fact the Liberty? The SOS was resent after the damaged antenna was repaired again, and it was picked up this time by the aircraft carrier USS America, and 2 ships were dispatched. 3 life rafts were deployed so men could get off the burning ship, but the torpedo boats focused their fire, destroying 2 of the life rafts and sweeping the decks to kill as many men as they could to prevent an evacuation. That act alone is a violation of the Geneva Convention, not to mention attacking a ship from a non-belligerent nation in international waters. Another strange development was when, after the 2-hour attack, the ship and crew headed to Malta, the 6th Fleet Commander, Rear Admiral Isaac Kidd, ordered the survivors to remove the ship's name from their uniforms. In fact, Admiral Kidd even ordered them to go ashore in civilian clothes, which the men were not supposed to have anyway. They were also told to grant no interviews and do not discuss the situation, even among each other. Otherwise, they would face court-martial and prison, or, even worse, for violating national security.
The attack began at 2 o'clock on a beautiful, bright, sunny day by French-made Mirage and Mistral jets painted black with no markings. We had no clue who was attacking us, but assumed it was an Arab state. During the first pass-by, the jets took out all but one of our transmitting antennas, as well as every watertight door above the waterline. The air attack lasted about 25 minutes, killing and maiming our firefighters and any sailor who moved. Our radio man took one antenna offline, so it wasn't transmitting and wasn't hit. He ran a long wire to it, and the SOS went out to the 6th Fleet. It was even picked up as far away as Vietnam. Rockstar, Rockstar, under attack by an unknown jet aircraft. Help us, help us. Captain Tully, skipper of the USS Saratoga, sent jets to come to our aid. Before the jets hit the horizon, they were recalled by Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara. Captain Engen of the USS America and Tully relaunched more aircraft to aid us. They were also recalled, this time by Lyndon Baines Johnson himself. He said, quote, "I don't care about a few dead sailors. I will not embarrass my ally, Israel. Return to base immediately," end quote. How did he know who was attacking us if we did not? We were set up by our own government to let a foreign government have their way with us. The IDF even dropped napalm on the bridge of our ship. How low they would go, we would soon find out. 3 motor torpedo boats headed our way, and 1 torpedo hit our starboard side. We saw the Star of David on the boats. They were there to sink us. The attack continued for another hour and a half. Attacking jet aircraft destroyed all but 3 of our life rafts, which we had put overboard. We were going to place our most seriously wounded in them so that they would have a chance at life. But the IDF would have none of that. They shot 2 of them out of the water and took 1 aboard their boats as a trophy of the kill. They continued shooting and killing my mates. They left and we thought that it was over, but it wasn't. IDF helicopters were sent with troops armed and ready to board our ship and finish us off. Then they just left. I guess the gig was up when the mighty IDF could not sink our defenseless ship. When it was all done, there were over 821 rocket and cannon holes and over 5,000 armor-piercing bullets riddling the ship. Napalm was burning us up, and a 40 by 40 foot torpedo hole was in her side, causing the ship to list badly to our starboard side. We then waited 17 hours for help. I guess they hoped that we would sink that night. Help was only 40 minutes away from us, but they left us out alone to die. When the USS America and the USS Davis arrived to help us, they took our wounded to care for them. Their wounds were so horrific, words cannot explain. Admiral Kidd boarded our ship a few days later, and the cover-up immediately began. We were ordered to never speak of the attack to anyone, not even with one another. Penalties would be fines, imprisonment, or worse, and we all knew that worse meant death. We have been treated like garbage for the last 57 years. Congress has been bought and paid for, with the exception, over the years, of a few brave lawmakers. Their names are Representatives Pete McCloskey, Paul Findley, and Jim Traficant. As the courageous Rep. Thomas Massey has noted, all Republican members of Congress except for him have AIPAC handlers. We can assume this is also true of nearly all Democrats. We are the most decorated ship in naval history for a single engagement. I believe God saved us that day to allow us to communicate the truth of this attack to leaders like you. We give all power to Jesus Christ. We are just his servants that horrible day and now. The USS Liberty survivors are the biggest whistleblowers this country has ever seen. We have been smeared as anti-Semitic, Jew haters, and Nazis. Our only sin is that we survived. We didn't kill anyone. Israel did all the murdering that day, and the US government did all the covering up. I'm asking you to help us save America by telling others the facts about the slaughter of my mates. We are begging you to support us. Respectfully, Phil Turney, the president of the USS Liberty Veterans Association.
When I came into office, I promised to look at the world's challenges with open eyes and very fresh thinking. We cannot solve our problems by making the same failed assumptions and repeating the same failed strategies of the past. Old challenges demand new approaches. My announcement today marks the beginning of a new approach to conflict between Israel and the Palestinians. In 1995, Congress adopted the Jerusalem Embassy Act, urging the federal government to relocate the American embassy to Jerusalem and to recognize that that city, and so importantly, is Israel's capital. This act passed Congress by an overwhelming bipartisan majority and was reaffirmed by a unanimous vote of the Senate only 6 months ago. Yet for over 20 years, every previous American president has exercised the law's waiver, refusing to move the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem or to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital city. Presidents issued these waivers under the belief that delaying the recognition of Jerusalem would advance the cause of peace.
You survived what you believe to be a false flag attack, and yet we have people in America who get on stage and refer to them as our greatest friend and ally.
I have said to people when they ask me, if this capital crumbled to the ground, the one thing that would remain is our commitment to our aid, and I don't even call it aid, our cooperation with Israel. That's fundamental.
Were I a Jew, I would be a Zionist. And my father pointed out to me, I did not need to be a Jew to be a Zionist, for I am. Israel is essential to the security of Jews worldwide. I say again, you need not be a Jew to be a Zionist. The fact is that since then, I've known every single prime minister, and it's been an honor. Formed strong working relations with each of them. And now, this is my 10th visit. Every chance to return to this great country, where the ancient roots of the Jewish people date back to biblical times, is a blessing. Because the connection between the Israeli people and the American people is bone deep.
You survived what you believe to be a false flag attack, and yet we have people in America who get on stage and refer to them as our greatest friend and ally.
You just like me because my daughter happens to be Jewish, right? She has a great husband, Jared, and I'll tell you what, Ivanka could not be happier, and she's very proud. The only bad news, I can't get her on Saturday. I call and call. I can't speak to my daughter anymore on Saturday, but that's okay.
Oh, beautiful. That's beautiful. Thank you.
I want to thank my Jewish daughter I have a Jewish daughter. This wasn't in the plan, but I'm very glad it happened. And by the way, I see Alan Dershowitz. Come on up here for a second, Alan. Wow. And I'd like to ask my friends, the pastors, to come up here. You know, Robert, and I have to say this to the other pastors, some of whom have been very kind, all of whom have been very kind. We've never had such evangelical Christian support. Jeff, come on up, Jeff. Come on up here, Jeff. You're the one that's doing such a good job legally to make sure all of this happens. But Robert Jeffress, I didn't know him, but I watched him, and I'd watch him on different shows, and I'd say, I like that guy. Man, he talks really great about me, and I like people that talk well about me. And he was saying, you know, he may not be the greatest Christian I've ever seen. He may not know the Bible quite as well as the rest of us. In fact, he may not know it very well at all. But that guy's a real leader, and he's going to do a job, and I appreciated that statement. I don't know if I should have, but I did. And I think we have led, because I think we've made more progress toward faith leaders. We got rid of the Johnson Amendment, which was a disaster. So I'd like to ask if, Robert, if you could say a couple of words, and if I could also ask Alan Dershowitz to say, and then we're going to sign a very important document. Okay, Robert, please.
Thank you. It is true. I believe President Trump is the most pro-faith president in history when you look at what he has done for people of all faiths. And Mr. President, you know, Jewish and Christian believers alike believe what God said to Abraham in Genesis 12, that God would bless those who bless Israel, and he would curse those who curse Israel. And I want to thank you, Mr. President, for being the kind of president who has the courage to stand up and be, when it comes to Israel, on the right side of history, but most importantly, you're on the right side of God, and that's why you are not going to fail, and we're going to stand behind you 100%. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Joe.
Great. For 65 of my 81 years, I have spent at universities all over the country and all over the world. There is no more important event in those 65 years to turn universities away from being bastions of hatred and discrimination than this executive order being signed today. It is a game changer. It will go down in history as one of the most important events in the 2,000-year battle against anti-Semitism.
Late today, President Trump signed that executive order at the White House. It essentially allows the government to interpret Judaism as both a race or nationality and a religion, even though that is still open to interpretation by some. Steve Hunnigs from the Jewish Community Relations Council says the order is not about calling Judaism a nationality,
which is a complicated way of saying that discrimination is forbidden based upon race and other immutable characteristics.
This comes after the rise of what the president views as anti-Semitism on college campuses.
Amen.
You survived what you believe to be a false flag attack, and yet we have people in America who get on stage and refer to them as our greatest friend and ally. I mean, how does that make you feel to just even hear that, to hear people say they're our greatest friend and ally? And by the way, I want to be clear, I count myself among those people. For the first 6 years of my career, I genuinely had no idea.
It goes down as one of the darkest days in U.S. Navy history. 57 years ago this week, for reasons still not completely understood, Israel attacked the Navy ship USS Liberty, killing 34 sailors. Mike Gooding talked to some local survivors, new at 5:30.
It's like a hot potato. Nobody wants to touch it.
That's a fact.
It's become a forgotten chapter in Navy history. On June 8, 1967, during the Six-Day War, without warning, Israeli jets and torpedo boats launched an attack on the unarmed, non-combatant American technical research ship USS Liberty, killing 34 crew members, wounding 171 others. Both the Israeli and U.S. governments later conducted inquiries and issued reports concluding the attack was a mistake.
This was not an accident.
Former Liberty sailors Terry McFarland and Jim Smith are convinced the full story has still never been told.
And the government's waiting for us all to pass on so they don't have to deal with the USS Liberty and the Liberty Veterans Association anymore, and they can just bury it.
Well, what I can tell you is that this has completely changed a lot for me. I just, first and foremost, just want to apologize to you. Like, I'm genuinely embarrassed at my ignorance, and it's confounding for me that I thought that I was on the side of the party of, truth and America first and patriots and caring about our veterans. And I'm realizing now that so many of these people are cowards. They're cowards. They know the truth. They lie to people as they're coming up in this movement, and they are completely occupied. There are some that are brave, obviously, Thomas Massey, but I do want to offer to you that I promise you, as long as you live, I will hold a candle for the USS Liberty. You forever have a platform. If I have a platform, I almost feel ashamed of myself that I thought to myself this year, oh my gosh, I'm getting so attacked by the Zionist media because I had a heart over the Palestinian children that were dying, and I realized I had to survive digital attacks. I mean, you survived. Yeah. What you survived is unbelievable.
The amount of that subsidy is remarkable and a testament to AIPAC's clout on Capitol Hill. Altogether, Israel gets more than $3 billion a year in assistance from the United States.
Sometimes the votes go through without a single debate, involving billions of dollars. You couldn't spend that kind of money in this country without a huge debate going on. But a foreign government gets this money without debate because simply it's just organized to get it.
Why does Israel get more aid, more U.S. aid, than any other country in the world? $700 per Israeli per year, as opposed to $50 per Egyptian per year, as opposed to $2 per African per year.
Often the debate comes up, who was the best and who was the worst president of the United States? Many people have their opinions, and there were many methods by which to gauge those responses. However, when it came to subterfuge, lying, intimidation, hypocrisy, bigotry, fraud, and possibly murder, few can touch President Lyndon Baines Johnson. Who was Lyndon Baines Johnson? Why is he both reviled and also revered, depending upon who you talk to?
I want to speak a bit about Lyndon Baines Johnson because there is a picture that seems to be emerging, and so I guess I'll sort of ask questions because there's other big events from around that time period that are similarly classified in a way that doesn't really make sense. You know, Lyndon Baines Johnson, the nation did not vote for him to be president of the United States, obviously.
Yes.
JFK was assassinated, and it is a fact that prior to his assassination, he was adamant that he wanted AIPAC, which I think was going by a different name at that time, to register as a foreign agent, and that they had ignored his demand that they register as a foreign agent. And then when he was shot a couple of months later, he no longer had to register. They no longer had to register as a foreign agent. It is also a fact that leading up to his death, he was having fights, which they have not declassified, arguments with the Prime Minister of Israel at that time, Ben Gurion. They have, again, not declassified any of those conversations, so we don't know what it was that they were arguing about, but I would imagine Lyndon Baines Johnson would have known that he had this sort of contentious relationship, obviously, with them trying to implement AIPAC and not wanting it to be registered as a foreign agent, and obviously him having arguments as the number 2 guy. You would think that he would know this. And before Muammar Gaddafi, the president of Libya, was murdered by us, arming insurgents, he gave a speech in front of the UN where he demanded that they investigate the killing of JFK, and he said, everybody knows that he was trying to stop their nuclear armament. He spoke about the nuclear reactor, and he had heavily suggested in that speech in the UN that that was perhaps that could have been the reason that he was arguing with the Prime Minister. Of course, we'll never know. And so it's quite shocking to know that information, to realize that JFK got killed, and to also know that the person who allegedly shot him, Lee Oswald Harvey, said he didn't shoot him, didn't kill him, and then he was shot by a guy named Jacob Rubinstein, who Muammar Gaddafi alleges was also an Israeli national. Maybe he had dual citizenship, I'm not sure, because again, we don't have the files. I'm just speaking about what has been said in the public sphere. It's kind of shocking that Lyndon Baines Johnson would be such an ally to Israel, so much so that he would tell people, I don't care if American sailors die, I'm not going to embarrass Israel, which means he didn't inherit JFK's frustration with the nation. He did not. He, if you remember, he says, you had a friend in JFK of Israel, but I'm going to be a much better friend. You have a better friend than you ever did. You know what, actually, I don't know if you had read this article. This really shocked me. This was published in the Jerusalem Post in 2008. The article is entitled, A Friend Indeed. I'll just read a bit of it. A few weeks ago, the Associated Press reported the newly released tapes from U.S. President Lyndon Johnson's White House office, which showed LBJ's, quote, personal and often emotional connection to Israel. The news agency pointed out that during the Johnson presidency, the United States became Israel's chief diplomatic ally and primary arms supplier. But the news report does little to reveal the full historical extent of Johnson's actions on behalf of the Jewish people in the state of Israel. Most students of the Arab-Israeli conflict can identify Johnson as the president during the 1967 war, but few know about LBJ's actions to rescue hundreds of endangered Jews during the Holocaust, actions that could have thrown him out of Congress and into jail. Indeed, the title of righteous Gentile is certainly appropriate in the case of the Texan, whose centennial year is being commemorated this year. It then goes on and speaks about how he, while serving as a young congressman, arranged for visas to be supplied to Jews that were in Warsaw and oversaw the apparently illegal immigration of hundreds of Jews through the port of Galveston, Texas. A key resource for uncovering LBJ's pro-Jewish activity is the unpublished 1989 doctoral thesis by a student named Louis Gamelak, a University of Texas student. And he speaks about LBJ's foreign affair background in this piece, and they were able to confirm through other historians and interviews with his wife and family members and political associates that the research was accurate. It says, quote, research into Johnson's personal history indicates that he inherited his concern for the Jewish people from his family. His aunt, Jessie Johnson Hatcher, a major influence on LBJ, was a member of the Zionist Organization of America. According to Gamelak, Aunt Jessie had nurtured LBJ's commitment to befriending Jews for 50 years. As a boy, he watched his politically active grandfather, Big Sam, and father, Little Sam, seek clemency for Leo Frank. This says the Jewish victim of blood libel. He's actually, he murdered a young Catholic girl during Passover in I believe it was 1913. I'll have to fact check that. But they present him as a victim of a blood libel. Johnson's later told friends that Lyndon's family hid in their cellar, while his father and uncle stood guard with shotguns on their porch in the case of the KKK attacks. So they say that he often cited Leo Frank's lynching as a sort of his opposition. But it's interesting because people, I don't think, knew this, that LBJ was Jewish, that his aunt was involved in the Zionist organization, and also that he pressured the administration, apparently, to have tighter ties with AIPAC. So we can probably trace, when we are speaking about AIPAC, the marriage, I would say, between the United States government and AIPAC, we can attribute that to Lyndon Baines Johnson. How does it make you feel to know that actually, you know, he was in fact more loyal to Israel?
What's your thoughts? Please be respectful with your comments. Also, please click the like, click the notification bell, and subscribe to this channel.
Listen, Genesis chapter 11 verse 10 explains the genealogy of Shem. Shem was a black man in Africa. If you repeat this back, Genesis 14 verse 13, Abraham steps on the scene. Being a descendant of Shem, which is a fact, means Abraham too was Abraham, born in the city of a black man called Nimrod, grandson of Ham. Ham had 4 sons. One was named Canaan. Here, let me do some explaining. Abraham, Isaac was Jacob had 12 sons, for real, and these were the children of Israel. According to Genesis chapter 10, these were the children of Israel. According to Genesis chapter 10, these were the children of Israel. According to Genesis chapter 10.